Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony. He's Ron. And we're about to uncover the MAGA propaganda not covered by the mainstream and corporate media. Although a slightly different show today because, as we discussed on the program last week, there is a new rhetoric coming out of the far right, the MAGA Republican group, and that is to reference all Democrats, but certainly some specific Democrats, as communists, as radicals, as socialists, as Marxists. So we thought we'd deal with some of the language that's being thrown about, because this is definitely going to be their tactic going into the midterms and certainly into 2028. Ron, there was plenty of evidence of that in Donald Trump's speeches of the last few days, or the last week, certainly. You can tell that it's clearly something that they've discussed behind the scenes, and this is a strategy now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell, if those of us who have followed Trump, and as long as we have covered him every day, listened to every speech, I mean, there are certain trends that you notice and patterns with the way he behaves. And one of the things that he does is he sort of road tests, for lack of a better term, different kind of strategies and terms. And he does it in his speeches, oftentimes with his supporters, where he would throw something out, and he's gauging the reaction, not only of his supporters in front of him, but the media, social media, to see whether he does it with nicknames for people. He does it with slogans, with policy. It's kind of like he just throws stuff out there and see what works. And so after you've seen that pattern for a while, you can pick up on when he thinks something is really, really good, how he behaves and how he reacts.
Right.
And the communism thing, as soon as he made his post, which he made his post the day after the three Mamdani endorsed candidates won in New York for the House, he made a post immediately after a few hours later, and it was all about that. And I just said at the time, I immediately tweeted, I said, this is what he's going to talk about every day from now until the midterms. And that was a couple weeks ago I said that.
Yeah.
And he has literally every day since then talked about this subject.
And so have his surrogates, people like Sean Hannity, for example. We'll look at that a little bit later. I just want to start, though, by reminding people, I grew up in a social democracy in the UK, and much of Europe are social democracies, not democratic socialism. There is a little bit of a difference, but really not much. So to me, things like socialized medicine and Medicare for all and all that stuff is normal. It's not radical. It is just normal. And to imagine life without it is a little bit weird. And so it's so interesting to me how the culture in the US is that those things are branded as extreme or radical ideas, when in much of the rest of the world, it's kind of normal. The other thing I think that's really important to point out is that there are no communists on any great number running for office or in office. In fact, the Communist Party of the United States has said out loud, we don't have, none of these people are members of our party. And I think that's important to point out too.
Yeah, well, communism is nationalization of all industry. There's no private property. No privately owned businesses. I mean, this is not that. None of these people, I think probably the most socialist is Chevalier in New York. She's probably the most left. Not even she is saying anything like that. So no, there's nobody who is talking about communism, but communism is a much scarier word, particularly in the history and the culture of the United States. So socialism has almost no stigma to it. The only people who recoil a lot when you bring up socialism is a lot of the people actually who emigrated here from Latin American countries, who experienced a more totalitarian, authoritarian version of socialism than in Europe, and they don't want to see that happen here. They're afraid of that, and so that message does work with some of those like Venezuelan American, Cuban American immigrants. But for the rest of America, they got to go to the communist card because the socialism card doesn't really have the stigma.
I'm sure that Donald Trump could not define a socialist or a communist or a Marxist if he was asked to, under pressure or even without pressure. I think what's interesting about these definitions, though, is that they are quite malleable. So, for example, the Chinese Communist Party, China is not a communist country. It's not run as a communist country.
Not anymore. Hasn't been for a long time.
But it brands itself the Chinese Communist Party, and Donald Trump will take that communist word there, and not just him, but all of his surrogates too, and make sure that they always reference the Chinese Communist Party. And that's not really done in other nations. Europe doesn't refer to China in that way. But then again, it's no different to Trump, including the middle name Hussein when he refers to Barack Obama. I mean, these are purposeful, racist and specific tropes to try and get a reaction.
Yep. And the labeling and the branding is very important to Trump and very important to the Republican Party. They spend a lot more time on the slogans and the labeling and the branding than Democrats do. I think Democrats don't get caught up as much in that kind of stuff. But for Republicans, it's critical. It's everything they do. They try and condense into 3-word slogans. Build the wall, I mean, lock her up, everything is a 3-word slogan or less. And so, that's it's what they do. And so that's why they refer to this as communist, Marxist, totalitarian, all these scary terms to use to describe people who just want health care for all. Really.
I know. And Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, he is a democratic socialist, you could argue, or a social democrat. I mean, he is very much on the left of the Democrats, but he's also one of the most popular politicians in America, and so that is proof. And I think he has much more of a force field around him than some of these younger, newer candidates, because people know who Bernie is. He's been completely consistent for decades with his messaging. But some of these younger people coming through, who are people of color as well, which again Donald Trump is weaponizing, he likes to scare people by thinking. I mean, he did it with the Squad, didn't he? Of course, originally with AOC and Rashida Tlaib, and these are the people that he weaponizes language against.
Yep, absolutely. And what they try and do is, I mean, it almost seems like the Squad people is like quaint now, they're not radical enough.
Yeah.
The new people are much worse. So, I mean, but if you can mix into the socialist theme, somebody who's not white, somebody who might be Muslim even, or not Christian in some way, young, or somebody who looks different, maybe has a wild haircut or dresses differently, then so much the better, especially for the optics of Fox News, which, by the way, Fox News has also been playing this stuff 24/7 as well, along with Trump.
Let's look at some of the candidates that Mamdani has endorsed. You mentioned a couple of them, but it is very interesting to see how smart, how educated, how opinionated these people are. And you could only wish for Republican Congress people to actually take an interest in America to the extent that these people do. Let's take a look at this being debated on CNN.
Darialize Chevalier is one of the more controversial candidates. CNN earlier in the year reported that she had deleted previous Twitter posts expressing views for abolishing police, prisons, borders, seizing private property, nationalizing major industries, calling into question Israel's right to exist. She spoke to a friend of the show, Esed Herndon, in a recent interview, said that all deportations are immoral. So all of that being said, there she is defeating a Democratic incumbent, a powerful member of the Hispanic caucus who's been there. The chairman. He's been there for a really long time. I mean, you could say that all of this is just controversial. She's a bad candidate, but she's likely to just be the congressperson. And does it not suggest, though, that the voters looked at that and they were like, we don't really care about that. We care about all these other things?
I think that's the problem for the greater Democratic Party in this district, or in these 3 districts. You have the ones who are the furthest to the left, who under no uncertain terms support open borders, do not support any deportation. And even in that podcast interview, I mean, she was given a follow-up of, even if it's a murderer, even if it's a rapist, no, they shouldn't be deported. Republicans are very obviously going to take advantage of this, and it's going to hurt the Democrats nationwide. You could win in New York, you can win in Seattle, you can win in Portland and Los Angeles, but that's where you're going to win. And if we're able to define the Democrats who have tried to run away from this label of being socialist, being open borders, being, pro-crime or anti-Israel, if that's the goal of the Democratic Party to run from that, you're not going to be able to do that anymore.
One important.
He's a right-wing radio host, right? So we'll just make it clear
Republican,
that a lot of the language that he's using is obviously very loaded, but also full of lies. He's actually not telling the truth about what these Democrats stand for. They don't stand for open borders. None of them do. Abolishing ICE is something that I think most people agree with now. You remember Border Patrol used to just be at the border. What ICE has done now is it's actually moved Border Patrol to inside the country, like a secret police. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think a couple things. I think that she did have a lot of posts that she's apologized for, that she made when she was young, very young. As a lot, a lot. I thank God there wasn't internet and social media when I was 19. I wouldn't want all of my random thoughts being available for the world to see 30 years later, because look, you say sometimes that's a time when you have a lot of ideas swimming around your head, and you're reading a lot of stuff, and your stream of consciousness stuff. And certainly there were a lot of things that I said in my 20s that I don't agree with now. So, and some of those things are coming back. I guess you could say to haunt or bite, whatever you want to say. She deleted them before, like they weren't unearthed before she deleted them. She deleted them first. Yeah. So, and then she apologized for some of them. And then she said with some of the others, I don't agree with those positions anymore. Those aren't my current position. Mamdani has done similar things as well. Talked about, look, those aren't my beliefs anymore. That was a long time ago. So I think that there's that issue with some of them. But I also think at the same time, and I think you clearly identify the problem, which is what the Republicans like that guy are going to do with some of this stuff. They are going to not want to isolate it. They don't want to just say that's their position. They want to say this is the position of the Democratic Party. And that, I know we're going to talk about that as well, which is that's the fear of a lot of the establishments, your Schumers, your Jeffries. Yeah. They are afraid that some of the positions that these guys have that are very, they're maybe considered out of the mainstream of American politics, that would be imputed to the entire Democratic Party and used against candidates in swing districts, like the candidate running against Mike Lawler, for example, which is like a 50-50 bare knuckle battle down to the line of a down the middle district. I guess you're going to have that candidate get asked, do you agree with the position of, her or Mamdani or Lander or something like that? Yeah. But I think that you have to allow for the fact that all political parties should have diversity of thought, should have difference of opinions on key issues. But you see what the Republicans do is they take the most extreme positions of, or the most, novel, radical, whatever you want, positions that they don't think are going to be popular in swing districts, and they're going to impute them onto those Democratic candidates. So you see their strategy. And then, of course, the strategy is how are the Democrats going to counter that? And you also hear that from the Democratic establishment. You hear that from Democratic consultants. They're concerned. Are these people going to take over the party? Are they going to be team players? Are they going to cause problems on votes? All of those issues we're going to talk about today.
Right. So. I mean, part of the problem is that the Democrats do need to sharpen their toolbox, don't they? Because
Yeah.
aside from that, the effects of the last election, and we don't have to go over the kind of Kamala Harris, Tim Walz effort, but lessons were learned, I'd like to think. But there is always a fear that Democrats are not able to kind of overcome their history and not make enough of an adjustment. And my advice, not that it's worth anything, has always been that they should be leaning into these candidates and to look at how successful Mamdani has been, because they are not radical. They are branded radical by the right, but as individuals running for Congress or for mayor or whatever, they really aren't radical compared to Republicans who are snatching people off the streets and corrupting the economy.
So let me say this. When I first got into politics in the 80s and the 90s, the Democratic Party was very strong in rural areas. I mean, they were very strong in the South. They had many Southern senators, governors all across the Deep South and the Midwest. So that has changed. And so when I look and I listen to, and the Democratic Party has largely, by the way, become a bi-coastal urban party as far as their representation in Congress. And so the question is, why has that happened and what can be done to fix it? Because I think there was a period of time, I even think during the Obama years, where many of the leaders of the Democratic Party said, that's okay. It's all right if we lose that constituency, rural America, white, no college Americans, because there's enough of us to beat them in elections. So we don't need to worry about those people anymore. And they stopped, I think a lot of them stopped talking to those blue collar working class voters and stopped messaging to them. And what I hear a lot from some of these DSA candidates, particularly Mamdani, is exactly this point, which is the way to reclaim those voters is not to just be anti-Trump, not just be anti-MAGA or, anti-oligarchy or whatever. It's to actually go back to the roots of the Democratic Party. And he talks about FDR and Lyndon Johnson a lot, Mamdani, right. And FDR is his hero.
Yes.
And he goes back and if you look at and you listen to some of the speeches that they gave, those two individuals specifically, you don't hear a lot of the same language from Democrats today. And what he's saying is be bold, talk about how to improve the lives of working class Americans again. And, we have to stop being this college educated bi-coastal elite sort of urban party of sophisticated people. And we have to go back to our roots, and not saying you lose the first part, but you reignite the second part. And the way to do that is with a lot of their ideas. And so the last thing I'll say is, I think with this is where I think a lot of the new ideas are going to come from that could re-energize Democratic voters, re-energize young voters are going to come from a lot of these people.
Because the fear originally was that the people on the left represented a kind of woke culture. And I don't really hear that language anymore now. I'm hearing affordability, and I'm hearing the types of things that affect everybody, whatever your gender, however you identify, and whatever your sexuality is irrelevant. It's more about these kind of broad issues that are now so important, like gas prices and grocery prices. And so they are using a kind of consistent language. And, wouldn't it be amazing, though, if the establishment Democrats took a leaf out of their book and said, okay, we're not accepting any corporate donor money anymore. We're not taking AIPAC money. We're not going to be lobbied. This is a fresh start for the Democrats, and put everybody on that even keel. Now, unfortunately, I appreciate that America is now so far gone with regard to the cost of campaigning that might not work out very well. But the point is that that is what the people want. And it is a vote winner.
I think one of the most distressing things that I've seen in politics over the last 20, 30 years has been a shift in sort of the power structure between the consultants and the candidates, where it used to be the candidate had their agenda and their message, and they hired a consultant who was good at packaging it and putting it out to the voters. Now that's almost flipped. Now what you have is consultants have their messaging, and it's not even a policy agenda. They just have messaging that they think will win elections, and they recruit candidates to run under that banner. And
it's the wrong way around.
They look for resume about those candidates. Like they're looking for military people. They're looking for people with, and we've seen this with the Democratic Party over and over again. They recruit these retired generals, retired colonels, or, people that were CEOs of this or built a business, whatever. On paper, they look great. But, one of the things that I learned in campaign consultant school when I went back in 2006 was that you can't run on a resume. You can't, people don't vote. People don't vote for what a candidate has done in their past or what they've accomplished. They vote based on what they think that candidate is going to do for them.
Yeah.
So when you have these candidates who get up there, and I'm seeing this more and more, especially with Democratic candidates that are being recruited by consultants and the party leaders, is they talk a lot about what they have done in their life instead of coming up with a fresh set of ideas about how they can improve other people's lives. And so that's what I think. A lot of these candidates you're seeing are not consultant dominated. They're not following a script that's been created for them by a political professional. They have their own ideas and their own policy agenda, and they're hiring consultants that are designed to sort of put it out to the public, which is sort of the old way it used to be.
Right. I was a political consultant, as you know, in the UK, and a special advisor and a media trainer, and I've been through all of this with the major left-leaning parties, the Labour Party and the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats. So I kind of been through this from on that side, and it occurred to me because I was watching the primary of the California governor, and Steve Hilton, who has kind of got through, was a consultant. That's what he did for a living in the UK. He was consultant to David Cameron, the Prime Minister. And when you listen to him speak and give interviews, watching a consultant do it exposes exactly what you're describing. That the authenticity is completely missing from the candidate. It is all about a very well-crafted agenda set that is very well delivered. All the checkbox with all the talking points. And it's just not enough. And that's the difference with these candidates specifically, is that they are the real deal. It's not anything to do with their resume.
And, the group of people within the Democratic Party who have the biggest issue with these candidates are a lot of former Republicans and former Republican campaign consultants, including one independent media company that is run by and populated by former Republican campaign consultants who have a long track record of losing elections going back many decades.
Right.
And so they are the ones largely, and they get a lot of airtime on TV, on MS Now and CNN and Substack and YouTube and everything else, because they have their own independent media companies now, since they can't get work as consultants anymore. And they are the ones who have the biggest issue with these candidates. Because why? Because they don't agree with them.
Yes.
So a lot of these guys are former Republicans, but they're now Democrats or independents or whatever. And they're lecturing the Democratic Party and saying, you can't do this. You can't go down this road. You can't be like this. And I watch it as a former Republican. I watch them say these things, and I'm somewhat horrified, to be honest with you, because I'm like, who are you to tell lifelong Democrats how to run their party, especially given the fact that when you were Republican consultants, you lost almost every race you were involved in. Why should Democrats listen to you? And the thing is, the reason why is they don't agree with any of their ideas. because
Yes.
they're not really Democrats.
Yes.
They're just anti-Trump Republicans who had no home in the Republican Party, and they became Democrats. And so I say that that's really a difference between myself and a lot of them, is that for me, I'm anti-Trump, yes, but I changed my mind about a lot of things. And I think a lot of those people who I think have way too much influence in the Democratic Party, by the way, they haven't really changed their mind about a lot of these issues. They just don't like Donald Trump.
There's a lot of muscle memory for legacy strategy and legacy protocols. And I think that is a big problem, because in order for the Democratic Party to genuinely change and to really hear the people and provide, the alternative to Trumpism, because the problem with Trumpism is it's huge and it's very well funded and it's very well organized and it's very well marketed. Everything about it, as much as appalling as it is and as amateurish as it is, it is still kind of monolithic in scale. And so the Democrats do have a tough job to take that on, especially when it comes to financing. But I just worry that even the media is stuck in this muscle memory place. I don't even think the media are very good at interviewing these candidates. I don't think they really even know what types of questions to ask,
Totally
or where to begin with them, because it doesn't fit into their kind of their script that they've been using for decades. Let's take a look at.
You make a great point. Before you,
Yeah.
When I went back to research for the show and watched a lot of the interviews
Yes.
of these people, I absolutely agreed with your point that you just made. A lot of these interviews were terrible.
Terrible. Yeah. It's so interesting. Just talking of terrible, I was watching the flotilla along the Hudson the other day for the 250th anniversary, and the coverage of that, the news coverage, was so terrible. Just like people had done no research, Ron. It was just so painful of this huge event, and none of these so-called reporters and journalists had taken any interest in the subject. And I just thought, this legacy media keeps letting us down, whether it's on a huge public event like that, where they've had 250 years to practice and rehearse for this moment, or even 10 years if you consider how long people have known about this, or when it comes to an essential and necessary change in the face of fascism. Because that's the problem. When you have a fascist takeover of government, you have to change everything. You have to change the way that you operate, both as a candidate, as an elected representative, but also as a journalist. Let's take a look at Erin Burnett interviewing Claire Valdez, and again, a perfect example of what we're discussing.
So Josh Gottheimer, Democratic congressman, he told CNN, obviously the socialists had a big win last night. The question is, are we going to let them take over the party, or are we going to stand up and fight back? Many of us believe, as I do, that if you're a socialist, you're not a Democrat. And two other prominent Democrats, one a senator, one a prominent strategist that you've probably known of your whole life, have also come out for other reasons criticizing. Here they are.
The dirtbag left is having their moment.
And understand, these people do not like Democrats. Not only are they not Democrats, they wish Democrats poorly.
Okay, there's a lot in there. Let's just start with James Carville. Do you wish, not only are you not a Democrat, you wish Democrats poorly, is what he's saying. Is that true?
What I wish is for working class people to have the dignity, the wages, the protections that they deserve. And if the Democratic Party is willing to stand for Medicare for all, is willing to fight for abolishing ICE and bringing them, the billions, trillions of dollars we spend on forever wars back into our communities, then that's the Democratic Party I want to be part of. That's what we're fighting for in these races. And I think we saw over the last, several weeks, months, as progressives around the country are winning, and last night, that this is what the working class and the Democratic electorate is also hungry for.
So, and you have a point there. Then when you listen to Senator Fetterman, the dirtbag left is having their moment. Obviously, when it comes to an issue like Israel, right, he is diametrically opposed to where you stand. But, can you recognize that the two of you are even in the same party?
It's a big party. It's a big tent party. I think what's important for me right now is saying that we won with a mandate in this race. We won across the entire district, and that the message that we had at the doors resonated. People want affordability. They want politicians who will stand up against ICE, who will stand up against forever wars, and who want to see the resources that we pour into agencies that do not make us safer back into our neighborhoods, in hospitals, and in healthcare, in education, the things that actually make lives dignified and beautiful here in New York 7.
So, and there's affordability. There's also the issue of Israel, and I want to follow on that just because obviously Congressman Gottheimer's talked about that a lot as well. Is the party big tent enough that you can be in the same party where you support Palestinian statehood and are talking about genocide with people who support arms sales to Israel and Israel's actions in this war and in Lebanon? Is the tent big enough to include a John Fetterman and a you on that issue?
What I'd say is that the people who do not agree with me that we should not be aiding and abetting a genocide and occupation, that the Democratic electorate does not reflect that position by far and large. The Democratic electorate wants to see us pull resources away from that and, again, put them back into our communities. They don't want to see our tax dollars going to fund a genocide, apartheid, occupation. They're tired of that. And we heard this over and over again at the doors. But this is an opinion that is reflected across the entire country. It's not just in New York City. And I think that Democrats would be well advised to listen to the people who put them in their offices when they say that.
It's quite frustrating to watch, isn't it, when you see these types of questions. I mean, John Fetterman is not a Democrat.
Exactly. So why are they bringing up? Who cares what Fetterman says?
Who cares what Carville says? Who's that guy these days?
I mean, Carville. When's the last time he ran a campaign that won?
Right. He just sits in his armchair and yeah.
I mean, and Fetterman. Look, Fetterman is brain dead. I mean, I don't know how. I know a lot of Democrats get mad at me when I talk about that, but
yeah.
Look, when he had that stroke, something happened to him, and he has never recovered, and his brain has gone haywire. And, it's one thing for him to be impaired cognitively from his issues, and I feel bad for that part of it. But at the same time, like, the United States Senate is not a rehab place for your medical conditions, particularly when it affects your attitude and your intelligence and your ability to communicate and all that. I mean, something snapped with him. This guy's on Fox News every single day. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Every single day, multiple times a day. He never goes on MS Now or any other, all he does 100% of the time is criticize Democrats. This guy is a useful idiot of Fox News and the Republican Party. He's no longer a Democrat. Democrats are counting down the days to get rid of this fool. If he ran in a primary right now, he would get destroyed. He would poll like in a Dem primary, he'd get like 8% of the vote. So why are his opinions right now relevant? And same thing with Carville. I mean, he's sitting down there in Louisiana. He's running his podcast. He's raising PAC money, corporate PAC money. And, a lot of that is going in his pocket. And he makes some good points sometimes about some of the issues about why his specialty was rural America back in the 90s when he had his heyday, and how Democrats could reach rural voters. And he sometimes makes good points about that. But
that was 40 years ago, Ron. It was
40 years ago. That the country and the party has changed.
I know. I also wanted to say very quickly just something about CNN, which has just changed unrecognizably due to the ownership changes there too.
For
and so anybody that thinks that they can watch CNN and get a kind of honest appraisal of where politics is, forget it, because they're stacking it with hosts now who have a right-wing agenda, and it's almost interesting to see who remains, because if you were a journalist and you were working in a network, and this has happened to me over the years, where there's a leadership change and the politics of the network changes, or there is a bias and they're forcing you to say certain things, you quit, right?
Yep.
You don't look at your bank balance and your monthly check and think, well, this is worth it. You quit. And some have, and all credit to them. But the fact that there are plenty of legacy hosts still working there under those circumstances tells me everything I need to know about the fact that everybody seems to have their price.
Yeah, that's it. They're making they could quit and get other jobs in media, but maybe not make as much money or not have as much of a position. So, yeah, CNN is rapidly. I don't think it was that great before. I stopped watching it a long time ago.
Yeah.
But since the ownership change, it's gotten significantly worse.
Yeah. I don't watch any cable news. The only thing I watch is the odd clip when it gets sent to me. Obviously, when we prep for this show. And I actually watch Fox more than I watch anything else to see what they're talking about and how they're spinning things. But I will not have any of this stuff on in the house. It's really unhealthy. Let's mention the ADL CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, because he was kind of asked questions about democratic socialists. And obviously he comes with huge opinions. Let's see how he spins this.
The Democratic Party has an anti-Semitism problem, and I can define it in 3 letters, the DSA. The DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, they should call it, discrimination and stereotyping and anti-Semitism. And I say that because we see this as the common thread that seems to link this party and their activists. They're not Democrats, but an obsession with the Jewish state seems to be the common denominator when you look at these candidates. Now, look, I want to be super clear. There's problems with anti-Semitism on the right as well. I'm not suggesting this is only a problem on the left, but we see this again and again and again. We see this in these congressional races last week. And by the way, we're seeing it right here in the city of New York with the largest Jewish population in the world. And we can talk about Mayor Mamdani if you like, because he has been gaslighting our community for years, saying he believes in protecting the Jewish people, but then refusing to do so in ways that all other normal politicians in the past have done. So yeah, Mika, you put it well. We have a problem. The Democratic Party has an anti-Semitism problem. It is the DSA, and it needs to deal with this in order to make its Jewish, members and Americans across the country feel safe.
So this is a whole other topic because, here we're getting into Jewish conservatives, Zionism, and everything else. I should say that Mamdani does not stand for the things that Jonathan Greenblatt just suggested. And what I think they don't understand is it's perfectly possible for people to have a kind of broad view of multi-faith and bringing everybody in under the same tent, and that whatever their personal religion or their skin tone is irrelevant to their position, especially when they're an elected representative.
There are organizations that are pillars of American society and American politics, whatever you want to say, been around for, as far as defending rights. ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, NAACP, we could list a bunch of them. And the ADL has always been one of those great institutions that Jonathan Greenblatt has run into the freaking ground. He's the worst ADL president in the history of the ADL. He has proven time and time again that he can be bought and bought off by people on the right. As long as they make a significant contribution to his organization, he will suddenly go quiet about them. And Elon Musk is a great example of that, who made a number of anti-Semitic comments, has a phone call with Greenblatt, and the next day Greenblatt is absolving him for his sins and saying that Elon he's got good in his heart, good intentions, all this nonsense. Greenblatt is terrible. And what he's doing, what you just heard him say right there is, if you listen very carefully, he talked about anti-Semitism, and then he gave one specific example of what he believes is anti-Semitic, and that is opposition to the Israeli state. And this is my problem, okay? When you conflate criticism for Netanyahu or criticism of the Israeli government or criticism of something Israel is doing with anti-Semitism, those are two very different things. You're not criticizing Jewish people because they're Jewish. You're not criticizing Jewish Americans. You are criticizing Israel and their government. I do all the time. And I don't consider myself anti-Semitic and I used to be a very strong supporter of aid to Israel for their military, but not anymore. So I agree with the DSA. What does that make me now an anti-Semite now?
Yeah.
My employers are Jewish, so no, I don't think so. And, I just don't support what the Israeli state has been doing for the last several years in their region. And whether you want to call it genocide, mass murder, mass destruction, cruelty, I think it's all been there on display, and criticizing that and calling it out does not mean you are anti-Semitic. Now, I will say that I don't agree with like protesters going up to like random Jewish people or random Jewish politicians and yelling at them because they're Jewish. And I think we've seen that, but that's like random people on the street. It's an activist. It's not elected officials doing that. It's not these candidates doing that. So I think that the Israel issue is an issue that is very a hot button divisive issue in the Democratic Party, not so much the Republican Party, although increasingly it is becoming that in the Republican Party. But in the Democratic Party, look, there are many establishment Dems, Chuck Schumer prominently among them, who still support 100% aid to Israel. Joe Biden did. And so I think that a lot of them are rapidly becoming out of step with the majority of Democrats.
But it's also, I would believe that there has been a huge shift in opinions. And this is not just the opinions of Democrats. This could be the opinions of conservatives and certainly Jews in America. I mean, the United Nations Independent Commission released a report last week that said that Israeli authorities and security forces deliberately targeted Palestinian children in Gaza and the West Bank, resulting in genocide and other atrocity crimes. So the UN is taking a position, and that does change things, because it becomes less about opinion and more about statistics and intelligence and a report. I get the sense that, because I want to go back to this kind of idea that Trump has given diktat about pushing this communism argument to everybody. And I want to show this clip of Caroline Levitt, because you can almost see her brain whirring, looking down the kind of checklist of things that she's been told to say and the position she's been told to take on behalf of the Trump regime when it comes to democratic socialists. Here it is.
Never would I imagine I'd be watching videos like that. Candidates running for the modern day Democrat Party. This is not your granddaddy's Democrat Party. This is not the Democrat Party of JFK. This is a full-blown communist revolution that is taking over Capitol Hill right here in Washington, D.C., just a few steps away from where we are sitting right now. The inmates are running the asylum. These are crazy people who are advocating against what I call the 3 Ps: prison, police, and private property. They don't want any of those things, and those are the ideals that founded this great country 250 years ago. But as President Trump says, communism is easy to sell. You just promise people free stuff. Until a few years, you're living in squalor with no free home, no free food. You're just sitting there with a whole bunch of communists looking around and saying, what the heck happened to our failed state?
And the president said he'd...
Yeah, people are already living in squalor with a MAGA Republican governance, so just bear that in mind.
My favorite part of what she said there, she said the 3 pillars, foundations of the founding of the country were prisons, police, and private property. Now, private property, I agree with. Okay, that was definitely a pillar of something very important to the founders. But prisons, I mean, there weren't any prisons in the colonies or the United States back then. You had like a handful of little stockades that might have like 1 or 2 people in them, but there were no prisons. There wasn't hardly anybody incarcerated at all in the United States at the founding of the country. This has been a relatively new phenomenon in the last 100 years, where we have these massive amount of people incarcerated because it's profitable. Of course, that's not. And what was the other one? Prisons and police. Yeah, police, I mean, yes. We had very few police. We had almost like some towns were lucky to have one, constable or sheriff and a deputy. Most places had there was no police back then. Very, very little. So that's just another, I mean, these idea of these massive police departments with these huge budgets and all this equipment, again, a new phenomenon that has taken place in the last several decades.
Well, it's militarized police
in America before, 100 years ago.
She did a thing that you described earlier as conflation there, and this is a theme, isn't it? Conflating sound bites with vast policy concepts, and this is going to be a problem for Democrats unless they can get on top of it, because obviously there's no socialists or social democrats or democratic socialists that want to abolish the police or abolish prisons. There is nuance here. Right. And the total lack of nuance and the total leaning on conflation to confuse the TV audience is how Republicans are going to run with this.
Because if I say I'm against privatization of the prison industry, which is my position, I'm against it completely. And if you say there are too many people in prison and a lot of these nonviolent offenders, drug offenders, et cetera, should be dealt with in different ways other than prison, or dealt with mental health counseling or drug rehabilitation early on when they first commit minor crimes, and they're dealt with properly, you could avoid them becoming, a part of this revolving door in the prison system. But it's because we send 17, 18, 19-year-old kids to prison on their first offense that they become career criminals largely. Yeah. But if I said those things, Caroline Leavitt would probably say I'm against prisons. I want to abolish prisons, right?
Yeah, but it's the lack of critical thinking. They are taking advantage of the fact that much of their audience does not think critically on these issues. They had the same thing with defund the police 4 years ago. You remember that?
Sure.
Where defund the police required a longer conversation with nuance. And yet, to the Republicans, it was a perfect tool for propaganda.
Yeah, because they turn that into Democrats want to get rid of all the police.
Yeah.
They hate the police. They don't respect the police.
Yeah.
Right. So, but again, but for that reason, years ago, I would say maybe at least 40% of your average police officers were Democrats, 30, 40 years ago. But now that's probably down like 10%. It's a much smaller number. And largely it's because of that perception that the Republicans have been successful in creating this perception that Democrats are against the police or hostile to them in some way.
And that is a problem, because if you've got the majority of law enforcers on the right, which has now become the far right, and you have obviously ICE, people are going to be on the right and the far right to take those jobs and to get those jobs. You are looking at a vast kind of militarized enforcement arm of governance that is very dangerous and is not good for social cohesion and civil liberties.
Yeah, I'll say that I'm also against the militarization of police.
Right.
Police becoming paramilitary organizations with AR-15s and all these tanks and heavy equipment and all that stuff, and wearing these camouflaged uniforms. I think we made a huge mistake back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we started allowing police agencies to do that. And now they're all like these paramilitary organizations. And I think that has affected the culture and the mindset of the average police officer. They're not community police officers anymore. They're become wannabe, special forces now, hang out into communities.
Yeah.
But again, you don't want to use a lot of anti-police necessarily rhetoric, because look, a lot of police officers, probably the vast majority, are good people who care a lot about their communities. And there's millions of, if you add up all the people in the corrections industry and the law enforcement agency, support staff, and then all of their families, you're talking about probably 10 million people. So I think it's not smart for the Democratic Party to obviously be openly hostile to that big of a group of people. And I don't think that they are. No. But the Republicans have been successful in creating that perception.
We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and compare the speeches made to celebrate the Independence Day and the 250th anniversary of America from Donald Trump and Zohran Mamdani, because they both made speeches to completely different views of the country. We'll do that next here on Uncovered. Look, I hear from people in our pro-democracy community every single day who have a brilliant business idea, but they're hesitant to take the leap. I get it. Starting can feel incredibly daunting, but if you've been sitting on a business idea, Shopify makes it easy to make it happen. Everything you need to start selling is included and ready from day one. We knew we needed a platform that was completely bulletproof for our global community, which is why we built the Midas Touch store entirely on Shopify. We didn't want corporate standard tech, we wanted something that just worked. The biggest game changer for the Midas Touch store has been the checkout process, including the moment your first customer is ready to pay. Shopify Checkout helps more of them finish their purchase, and when they come back to grab our latest gear, their details are already saved. One tap via Shop Pay, and they're completely done, making your customers' lives easier, making your life easier, and that is a massive win-win. Because Shopify handles all the technical setup and the checkout securely. You actually have more time to focus on growing your business and utilizing the tools to do it. You shouldn't be wasting your precious time fixing broken back-end code or server mistakes. You want a platform that scales with you effortlessly. With Shopify, nothing stands between your idea and a real business. So, go make it one. If you're ready to stop putting off your business idea and start hearing, then you're ready for Shopify. Start your free trial at shopify.com/uncovered today. You heard that right. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/uncovered. That's shopify.com/uncovered. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. So Donald Trump posted a couple of posts, didn't he, that were very aggressive about these candidates that were being that Mamdani was endorsing. This was last week when he was ahead of the speech he made to the Faith and Freedom Coalition. And he said, one of the statements I'll be making, perhaps the most important of them all, concerns the recent election of communists in our country. Communism is very easy to sell. I'd be the greatest communist in history. I'd give free rent, free houses, free food. Everything is free. Unfortunately, after 2 or 3 years, the country where this is taking place would fail. It always does. And then you'll start living in squalor. It's very interesting, isn't it, how the language of his post is almost identical to what Caroline Levitt said in that interview.
Yeah, that's what they do. They come up with these slogans and these talking points, and they just repeat them over and over and over again until it gradually sinks in and it moves public opinion, at least a certain segment of public opinion. Yeah. So, but you see there, I mean, there's nobody calling for any of those things. I mean, I haven't heard Mamdani ever talk about free rent for anyone or free anything for anyone. I mean, we talked about healthcare and public transit.
Yeah.
So that I think he's talked about, but free rent. No, I've heard him talk about rent not going up and getting a handle on rent, or landlords not gouging tenants,
which he's done. I mean, that is done.
He's accomplished that already. Yeah. So I mean, it's just, that's a classic thing that Republicans do, is they paint Democrats with taking positions that they have never taken before. And that's always been a mantra of mine, is like, don't let Republicans define who you are.
Right.
You must get out there and you must define who you are. And I think that's where people get jazzed about Mamdani, is he's very good at defending himself and getting what he really believes, his message, really out there. And the Republican attacks on him are not effective for that reason. But a lot of Democrats are not as good.
I do wish there was more pushback generally from establishment Democrats, especially. And I've said several times on this show over the last few years that we've been doing it, Ron, that they should be doing weekly press conferences debunking Republican propaganda, where they play the tapes and bring the receipts, like we do here. But doing it on a national platform. And it's almost, they've always seemed to have this attitude that if you ignore it it'll go away, or you won't amplify it, and therefore more people won't see it. And I think that's completely wrong in this day and age.
I mean, that was my first thought when I heard that Mamdani is going to give a sort of an alternate July 4th national address. I mean, he was speaking to New York, but everyone was watching what he said across the country. And so I thought, why is he the only one doing this?
Right.
Why is he the only one? He knows that Trump is giving this 2 major national speeches, one on July 3rd at Rushmore and one on July 4th in DC, where he's going to go after Mamdani, and he's going to go after the Democratic Party and claim that they're becoming communist because of Mamdani's influence. Mamdani gets out there in front of Trump hours before Trump's speech and gives his own, and he defines for himself what he stands for. And so this is the kind of thing that we talked about them counter programming, getting out there and giving the alternative message. But then you look around and you say, where's the rest of the Democratic Party? Who else is doing this? I think I saw Newsom gave a little speech too.
Yeah.
But that was about it.
I get the sense that we're starting to see Mamdani and hopefully other progressive voices in the Democratic Party recognize that there is a gap in the market to fill, to step up, because Schumer ain't doing it and Jeffries ain't doing it. So why not? I mean, there's no rules to say they can't make these types of speeches or press conferences or special announcements. And I would really like to see them seize the moment and fill that void. I just want to play one before we get to the speeches. I want to play this other clip from Fox where they're talking about these so-called radical policies of Mamdani and his endorsement of these candidates.
But in places like New York, where they're trying to just flip establishment Democrats, policies like this. Here's Darialize Chevalier's policies: abolish ICE, anti-deportation, Medicare for all. Okay, that's a basic democratic principle. Universal basic income, very controversial. Anti-Israel, anti-military aid, opposes prison for murderers. Here's her position on deportations: I'm not okay with any deportation. I think all deportation is wrong because I think it's an incredibly cruel punishment that is really only relegated to people on the basis of where they were born. And, I think that we should just not have a system that allows deportation to happen at all, including people who have been convicted of crime.
I love that picture of Avila Chevalier. It's just so much joy. And they use that kind of language. They talk about things being beautiful and life being happy, and the kind of language that describes humanity that you would never hear Republicans refer to. So much negativity there, and there is an element of positivity that comes with this concept of community.
And again, this is one candidate who is not even elected yet to anything. They're the nominee.
And they're terrified.
And we're making this person who 99% of the country has never heard of. I'm going to say 99.9% of the country has never heard of.
Yeah.
And making her now the face of the Democratic Party on Fox, and they're just taking her old Facebook posts or even things that she said during the campaign, and they're making it like this is the position of the Democratic Party. Look, I have no problem if you have a handful of people inside the party who have pretty radical ideas or who, I disagree with very much on a particular issue. I mean, if that's her position, like no one who commits murder could go to prison. I suspect that if you should go to prison, I suspect if you looked up what she actually said, it's probably something different. But I don't have time to do that. But I mean, I would be against that. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to kick her out of the Democratic Party. I would want to debate her about that. And as someone who's worked in the criminal justice system for as long as I have, as to why I think that that's a bad idea. But I wouldn't be looking to kick her out of the party because I disagree with her about a couple of issues,
But we're supposed to debate. I mean, that's the point of democracy. And unfortunately, I think the U.S., because it doesn't have any mechanism for debate. I mean, even what they call a debate in the House is not a debate as I know it compared to the House of Commons. I mean, trust me, it is just someone makes a statement and nobody shows up to listen to it in the Congress. And so there really isn't this exchange of ideas like we see in European parliaments. Just so different, really. And so that's why there are these opportunities for Republicans and, of course, state regime media, in the case of Fox, to rewrite the narrative, rewrite the story. And Democrats have to kind of stop that at every opportunity. Okay, should we look at some of these speeches? Should we look at Mamdani's speech first and some of the things that he's had to say? I mean, this is, again, as we said earlier, this is a really clever move by him. You know, he was sitting at, was it George Washington's desk that he was sitting at that was once used by Washington, and he had surrounded, he was flanked by people who had recently naturalized and become U.S. citizens.
Yep.
And they held U.S. flags and they stood really still. And it was none of that kind of chicanery and fakery that Trump surrounds himself with at speeches.
No laser show or no explosions going off. And
no
music.
Right. But he really went for it, didn't he? I mean, he pulled no punches with regard to his criticism of the current system. He didn't name Donald Trump,
correct,
but he did certainly.
I don't think he named anybody.
Didn't name anybody, right? But he did kind of take them down. Let's take a look.
That legacy of every generation of Americans insisting that the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness extends to them too, is no relic of the past. It carried millions of Black Americans north during the Great Migration. It drew hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans to New York City after the Second World War. It invited countless others from the West Indies and South Asia and West Africa and across the world. And it is what brought my family to this city when I was 7 years old. My family did not arrive by boat, although we saw the Statue of Liberty from the window of the plane. Even from the air, we could make out the promise of America, the promise of the beautiful patriotic work of rendering America, year after year, a little more faithful to its founding ideals. There is a term so often used to describe our nation and those who have shaped it: American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism, the conventional wisdom tells us, makes our freedom a little more free, is how we dug the Erie Canal and irrigated the West, is why children in faraway lands grow up dreaming of one day moving here. And yet the irony is that the story of America has so often been written by those who were told by others with power and influence and wealth that they were anything but exceptional. For generation after generation, we have been told that when the world has sent its people to our shores, it has not sent its best. It sent Puritans and Sikhs and Quakers and Muslims and Jewish people who were banished for praying the wrong way, worshiping the wrong gods, angering the wrong people. It sent peasants and serfs from slums and shtetls who were treated as less because they hardly owned clothes, let alone land. It sent immigrants from whom power was something someone else had. We are told that America is exceptional because we are richer, stronger, more powerful than everyone else. The truth, my friends, is that America is exceptional because here, nothing is fixed into place. The frontier may be closed, we may have walked on the moon, but the work of fulfilling the values first enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, that work endures, and it belongs to us all. It belongs too to our newest Americans, those standing here with me today, all of whom were recently naturalized. Nearly a decade ago, I too felt what you feel, the joy of no longer being just a New Yorker, but an American too. You each hold a special power, the power to determine what America means.
Isn't it nice to hear an elected representative, in this case the mayor of New York, speaking in complete sentences and not the way that Giuliani used to talk? Do you get a sense that this is a whole new chapter for Democrats?
Yes, because here's what else. Here, the Republican idea of the 4th of July, of Independence Day, is fireworks, hot dog eating contests, lots of flags. America is great. America is amazing. It's the best country in the world. Love it or leave it. That is the only thing that should be said. Military flyovers, That is the only thing that should happen on a 4th of July. And so I think that Mamdani's speech is so different than the typical American culture and I'll say a lot of Democrats do all of those same things, those same rituals as Republicans, to them, that's what July 4th is. And so I think what Mamdani is doing there is saying, well, to so many Americans, July 4th means something a little different. And there's a lot more to it. And we look at this country a lot differently as first generation or immigrants. And we think that a lot of the people in this country whose families have been here a long time maybe have lost sight of those things. And he's pointing those things out. It goes back to sort of the way you look at it goes back to the way you look at the founding fathers, because Mamdani also talks about them as well.
Yes.
The Republican position is basically like, these are infallible people. They're great people. They're incredible. We should worship them as deities and everything else. And I think that there's another position that a handful of people make, that they're evil, they're horrible, because if they own slaves or then we can't look at anything else that they may have done or accomplished and consider those things and praise those things because they own slaves or because they did other bad things. They're so flawed by those things that they're horrible people and they're terrible people, and we're going to discount everything else. To me, I think Mamdani is more nuanced. He's between those two positions. He's saying we can recognize both the great things that they accomplished and the great things that they did and the legacy that they have left for us, while at the same time observing their flaws and their inhumanity and the terrible things that they did at the same time, because they were human beings. They're not gods. And so
because two things can be true at the same time.
I think that position is my position. Yes. And so am I now a communist? I don't think so. But the Republicans have a big problem with anybody saying anything that could be remotely construed as criticism of the United States and the founding of the United States, especially by an immigrant who happens to be Muslim on the 4th of July.
Right. The Republicans see everything as binary.
Right.
And the Democrats, I mean, they used the term broad tent earlier. I mean, this is the truth of it. Is that really you've got about 20 political parties in the Democratic Party. And so when you kind of loop everybody together, it is difficult. And so you have to think critically and you have to accept the nuance of various things. But I think that this theme that two things can be true is very important. Let's listen to some more of the speech.
We see America each time working people demand more, not just for themselves, but for their fellow Americans. There are some who respond to those who ask for more from America with a simple refrain. Love it or leave it, they say. But patriotism has never been about pretending our nation is without flaws. Patriotism is every act of righteous dissent. It is every march led under the heavy sun. It is every protest held a decade before its time. It is precisely because we love this nation that we will not leave it. After all, who loves America more than those who have sacrificed so much to make it free? Today, I think not only of the 4th of July, I think too of the 9th of July. 5 days after the Declaration of Independence was signed, it arrived here in our New York City. Redcoats had disembarked on Staten Island. More than 100 British ships loomed just offshore. Across this city, the Continental Army prepared for an invasion. George Washington commanded his brigades to assemble just a few feet from this building. It was known then as the Commons. Today, we call it City Hall Park. There, within range of British guns, Washington ordered his generals to read the Declaration aloud. And with the world's mightiest empire poised to attack, Washington told the people of New York City what we will celebrate tomorrow, that we had declared our independence, that freedom was within reach. That evening, danger loomed. Conflict was not a question, but a certainty. And yet when those early New Yorkers marched toward the statue of King George III that stood in the Bowling Green, a statue they would melt down into bullets for their young army, they walked in unison, grounded not in the pursuit of plunder, but in ideals that for the first time had a name: America. Those ideals upon which our nation was built, they are strong enough to endure any authoritarian regime, but only if we reach for them. Ours is a nation working each day towards the perfection in which it was conceived, a nation striving each day to better itself. Therein lies the work of America: the striving, the bettering, the reaching towards perfection. What a privilege each of us has to live in a nation that every one of its inhabitants can shape. What a responsibility each of us possesses to prove ourselves worthy of all those who came before. What power each of us holds to bring America ever closer to the greatness so many have seen when they looked upon these shores. The greatness that for 250 years has been America. Thank you. God bless America. God bless New York City. And happy 4th of July.
So interesting, isn't it? Having somebody, and I think this is towards all immigrants, that there is so much thought that goes into the position that you have, being in a new country and wanting to assimilate and wanting to be part of it and contribute to it and pay tax and work hard and achieve the American dream. I would argue that actually immigrants they don't take it for granted like many Americans might.
And on Fox News, it was an endless doom loop for 48 hours after that speech, which is probably still going on as we're sitting here.
Yes,
right. Of that saying that was the most dark, divisive, nasty speech ever given by an elected official.
Yeah.
I got stuck on two words that he used, Mamdani, which is privilege and responsibility. And he said it's a privilege to be an American citizen, and it's our responsibility to continue on the legacy of those who went before us and to make it even better of a country. And I thought, the Fox viewer Republican mentality of immigrants, so many immigrants, is that they're here because they want to get something they want to get on government assistance, and they want to commit crimes, and they want to rape, pillage, and plunder. That's how they view immigrants, that they're not here to contribute anything or to be productive, that they're here to take from us, from native born Americans. They want what we have, and they want to take it from us. But that's not what you hear Mamdani saying. He's saying quite the opposite.
Well, because it's not true.
That's not conveyed to the Fox audience.
No. Meanwhile, the current president is literally rinsing Americans and their tax dollars for his own pet projects. And it's like the hypocrisy is rife. Let's have a look at some of the Fox hosts responding to the speech.
Said, Mamdani seems to be sort of misreading the room. He said, missing the boat. And as we sit here in front of the Statue of Liberty, in front of Ellis Island, where so many of our families came over on boats, my stories of my grandparents passed down through my father, explaining what that was like, a ship on 2 weeks to get to the land of opportunity. The whole world was in front of them because where they came from was an island that was brought to ruin and starvation thanks to the Italian government. Well, this is that land of opportunity that now our mayor is calling an arena of supremacy.
Well, he's not my mayor. I wouldn't have had him. But that's what the city behind us voted for. This is the Jersey side where I live. So, a couple of things there. The history has taught us that your family, all these families who came through that way, they were clear-eyed, Emily, about what didn't work. They were fleeing actual oppressive governments and socialism and communism, and they were trying to get away at a time when it felt like the only way anybody wanted to solve anything was through violence. And what have we seen tick up? Political violence in this country. I say this time and time again, this is our moment not to become what so many people left. People still want to come here. They still see us as the bastion of light and freedom, and they're right about that. But it's not free. And it's not without all of our dedication to remember what it takes: a strong U.S. military, good policies. Look, I don't know exactly what the impetus is for dividing us per Zohran Mamdani. I would imagine the list is long. It's about power. It's about money. It's about a whole host of things. What it also is about is if he had better ideas, he'd be giving them. He's giving us ideas that have been proven that they don't work. Socialism easing into communism. And this is one heck of a flyover of the National Mall. And if it's on time, because I have a whole list here, and from where we sit, it's hard to tell what's what. But there is a huge formation over the mall right now. U.S. Air Force.
As a black woman with a platform, she should be ashamed of herself. I never quite
and the
understand
other host talking about. I mean, do you not understand the way Sicilian immigrants were treated back then?
Yeah.
They were horribly discriminated against. Your German, Anglo, Irish Americans were extremely hostile to Italian immigrants and viewed them all as uneducated. Where have we heard this before? Uneducated, uncultured, uncouth, have nothing to contribute to American society, can't speak the language, they're bringing diseases over from Europe. All the same things that were said about her ancestors from Sicily back then, they're all criminals, they're all in organized crime, are being said about immigrants now. And yet she forgets all that. Who are the people who are most hostile to the Godfather movies when they came out in the early 70s, the first Godfather? Italian Americans. Yeah. Why? Because they felt that those movies contributed to the stigma that they were just starting to overcome 50 years later when the Godfather movies came out. And they were very upset, a lot of Italian Americans. I mean, that attitude has changed now, but back then people forget this, but it was very common for Italian Americans to speak out against the Godfather movies because they said this feeds into the stereotypes that people have about Italian immigrants. So again, these people who are the grandchildren of these first immigrants, they have forgotten all of that.
Or they have purposely rewritten the narrative, or that maybe they were never told in the first place. I mean, it is a selective memory. It is
even the fact that they were Catholic was not good back then.
I think people forget also that when the immigrant ships came to Ellis Island, the white people were allowed to get off the ship straight away and head straight to Manhattan or Jersey or wherever. But the people of color and the poor people, the third-class passengers, they were the ones who were scrutinized. They were the ones who had to go through the health checks. They were the ones who were treated very, very differently to the white people who were up in first and second class. And it wasn't as simple as just people coming over and everybody assimilating. It was hard. It was really tough, even once you got to Ellis Island. And so and then of course there was quotas back then too, and then they effectively kind of turned that tap off as well because they said they had too many people. So the history is very nuanced. It's not as simple as she's making it. Let's talk about Donald Trump's speech that he made, the eventual speech that started at 11:15 at night. This is after the National Mall was evacuated twice because of thunderstorms and weather, and he came on stage and claimed that 375,000 people had been there earlier. And now 150,000 people had come back at this kind of late stage, and nobody knows if those numbers are true. I noticed that the camera operators did not film any of the audience. It was very much focused on the stage. But I was hoping, and I'm foolish to think this, that he might put politics aside and just talk about the 250th anniversary of the country, the Declaration of Independence, the 4th of July, and all of those wonderful things. And no, it was another Donald Trump rally speech with all of his classic tropes, his gags, his stand-up routine. It was all over the place. It wasn't even a good speech. I mean, it was poorly written. And I, as a former speechwriter, could tell that he cut it short. That it was
going to definitely cut it short.
It was going to go on.
He stuck to the script. He didn't wander off script very often, as usual. But yeah, I mean, you make a great point, which is, if there are certain times when we always have expected the president of the United States
to
give a unifying speech to the country where he makes it clear that he represents everyone, not just Republicans, but Democrats, independents, all political parties, all communities, and that we're all in this together. And we do need these moments in our history and throughout the year where we do all come together as Americans and just set the politics aside, right? So I was at a 4th of July dinner yesterday, a 4th of July, with people that I didn't know. And of course, the subject always comes up. What do you do for work? And I just said, well, I cover politics. And they were like, okay, well, we're not going to discuss politics at all. I said, I'm perfectly happy not to do that. Believe me, I'm good, but I think that's sort of, there are times when you have to set sort of politics aside to keep everybody unified and happy in a particular setting. So, but Trump's not capable of doing that. He can't do it. He can't just give a speech for everyone and to talk about everyone in a positive way. It's always about two things: himself and attacking people he doesn't agree with. Even on Christmas, we've seen him do it on Christmas. We've seen him do it on Easter. We've seen him do it on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July.
Yeah, he can't help himself, can he? Because he is, well, deranged, but he is so unwell. And that's not an excuse, but it's a reason that he shouldn't be the president. Let's take a look.
Who settled the West and conquered the skies. You know who those people are. But we will never let that happen. Our American ancestors did not shed their blood at Concord and Trenton, Gettysburg and Shiloh, Midway and Normandy, just so that a band of thieves, radicals, and lunatics could come in and loot, pillage our nation. Our heroes died to win, build, and to save, and to build truly a great country, the greatest country ever in the world.
Yeah.
He just said it. I mean, immigrants are here to loot and pillage America.
Not even trying to hide
flat
it.
out.
Meanwhile, there was a Patriot Front march on D.C. of 400 far-right nationalists with their faces covered, and now this image, which I'm sure you saw, of this young black woman sitting on the subway, minding her own business while they all stood around her. I mean, if that is not the defining image of this 4th of July, I don't know what is. But I recognize that Trump doesn't care. And in fact, I mean, that speech was from the Mount Rushmore speech, but certainly when I was watching, unfortunately, sitting through the whole speech that he made on the National Mall and then watching the show afterwards, where, of course, they couldn't get any famous musicians to take part, so they had to get a military band to do all the music, and Lee Greenwood obviously sung that he was proud still to be an American. That it was so white, and it was so straight, and it did not look like the America that I know. It was the ideal for these kind of far-right Christian nationalists of what they want. It was the whitest. I mean, even when they were singing, was it September, the Earth, Wind and Fire song? It was the whitest version of September I have ever heard.
One of the greatest songs of all time.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah,
but,
ruined. Yeah.
And then, of course, they did YMCA, which was just hilarious, because even that, it was like a church version of YMCA. I mean, if you really want to see what America looks like, I appreciate that the nation is vast, and I appreciate that there are 50 states, and I appreciate that there are differing opinions, but it's not that. And that is what this kind of Heritage Foundation movement are desperate to take it back to.
And that's why when the artist found out, who had originally agreed to do it, found out that it really wasn't the nonpartisan America 250 organization, it was the Donald Trumpified Freedom 250 that had invited them. They all immediately backed out, wanted nothing to do with it, because they knew This isn't about America. This is about Donald Trump and his hateful agenda, and they wanted no part of it. Who wants to be up on stage vouching or representing that?
Right.
None of the artists did, except for Vanilla Ice. But unfortunately, Vanilla Ice's performance got rained out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the sad thing about using kind of military officers to sing and play is they don't get a choice to pull out.
Yeah. They're ordered to do it.
Ordered to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at another piece of this Rushmore speech where you can see that in his mind he's imagining an image of Zohran Mamdani.
You can be loyal to Karl Marx, or you can be loyal to America. You can be a communist, or you can be a patriot. You cannot be both. As for those who peddle Marxist lies about our heritage, who tell our children that we live on stolen land or that our heroes were oppressors, they're doing something much worse than slandering our past. They are slandering and attacking our future. Not going to let that happen. They're trying to tear down the great American character, to destroy the people who declared independence, who crossed the Delaware, who settled the West, and who conquered the skies. You know who those people are. But we will never let that happen. Our American ancestors did not shed their blood at Concord and Trenton, Gettysburg and Shiloh, Midway and Normandy, just so that a band of thieves, radicals, and lunatics could come in and loot, pillage our nation. Our heroes died to win, build, and to save, and to build truly a great country, the greatest country ever in the world.
Yeah, there's only so many times you can tell people it's the greatest country before they look at their bank accounts and their salaries and their cost of living and their quality of life, where people are going to be like, okay, yeah, these two things don't really tally.
Well, now we have arrived at the whole reason for the strategy of Donald Trump right now, the midterm strategy, which is he has nothing else to sell. He can get up there on True Social and he can tell his supporters that everything is great and it's hotter than it's ever been, and 19 trillion, as he said the other, 19 trillion dollars is coming into the country, and the economy's never been better, stock market's been. But you can fool a lot of people about a lot of things. You can lie to them and you can convince them, and you can fool them about foreign policy, about crime, whatever. You can immigration, you can feed them a bunch of BS and get them to believe it. But you can't fool them about their bank accounts and how much things cost at the grocery store and the gas pump. And that's his problem. And I think that he knows it. I think the Republican consultants know it. I think the RNC chair knows it. And that is why they have decided, what are we, 4 months out, 5 months out from the midterms, 5 months out. They understand that the only way that they're going to succeed, the only hope that they have really, is to lean heavy into this messaging that all the Democrats are communists and they want to, pillage and loot the country and take everything you have. A message of darkness, a message of fear. And that's all they got. That's all they got to sell. And that's why Trump is so enthusiastic about this, because he was dreading having to get out there and talk about the economy and all of that stuff, and foreign policy, which has been a disaster. And now he has something that he likes to talk about: immigrant communists.
It's gonna end up backfiring, because
I would hope so.
Because these people are far more eloquent, far more intelligent, far more evolved than Donald Trump and his people will ever be. And that's why Trump is so scared, because deep inside they know that these people who have stepped up and got themselves elected are actually far more capable than they ever will be.
You know what proves that? The one face-to-face meeting Trump has with Mamdani in the Oval Office on his home turf.
That's right.
Which Fox hyped up our man is going to show Mamdani. He's
Oh,
going to teach him a lesson. They were excited for days. And what happens? A love fest. Trump praises Mamdani, talks him up, says he's a great guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, it goes to show you, like, head to head, face to face in a fair fight, Donald Trump can't handle these people.
Yeah.
So he has to go out there and tell all these lies and fairy tales.
Well, Obama said this in an interview the other day, didn't he? He said that these keyboard warriors, and he was talking about Trump specifically, that it's one thing to be posting on Truth Social about him and others, but it's another thing to say it to their faces. And they're cowards at the end of the day. So Zohran Mamdani went did an interview, an ABC interview with Jonathan Karl, and Jonathan Karl asked him how he feels about being the poster child for the Democratic Party, considering that the Republicans are accusing him of communism and everything else. Let's see how he responded.
Probably heard what President Trump had to say about you and about the candidates you supported, and he warned that if socialists win, and he calls you communists, but you will start living in squalor. There'll be no food, no housing, no military, no law and order. There'll be nothing. And he had a few other choice words. By the way, he also said he still likes you. But what do you make of what he? I mean, the Republicans are going to make you the poster child for the Democratic Party.
Let them. We don't have to ask ourselves what life looks like if a socialist wins. I won last November, and over the course of these last 6 months, what we've delivered for working people are the very things we were told were impossible. We've delivered free childcare for 2-year-olds for the first time in New York City history. We've delivered tens of millions of dollars back to tenants who were taken advantage of by bad landlords. We've delivered 165,000 potholes being paved. And we've done all of these things while also delivering the lowest recorded crime in our city's history. That's what it looks like to have democratic socialism. And what you're seeing is that New Yorkers experienced this for 6 months and made the decision that they wanted to see more of it on the national stage as well.
Can a democratic socialist?
He's good, isn't he?
I mean, that's what I said. The best thing for this movement is for them to be successful while governing, be successful in office.
Yes.
And Mamdani, there's a lot riding on Mamdani being successful. And I think what you're going to see increasingly more and more is Democratic candidates in the next election cycle in 2028 all over the country make trips to New York City asking Mamdani for his endorsement, and him giving it to a lot of people.
Yeah. He was asked about, his platform and how it can roll out nationally, and he was quite happy to take that on. That he could be the face of the Democratic Party, even though he can't run for president because he wasn't born in the US, but he can certainly influence the candidates that do. Okay, we have to finish, but Ron, thank you as ever. I've enjoyed this kind of special episode of Uncovered. If you are able, please check out our sponsors in the description below. The audio podcast drops later tonight, and we'll come back next Wednesday with another episode. Thanks a lot, Ron.
All right. See you next week, everyone.